We fast forward to 2011. Had a lot of little things happen in between, just minor stuff. But 2011, there were a group of us, normally between 7 and 8 of us, sometimes there were more. We had several farms: Campbellton, Florida; Marianna, Florida; Chipley, several farms that we worked, and our job was to go in and eradicate the wild pigs that were destroying the crops. Well, this particular night I needed to check the traps, and we had a big trap on that field. The wild pigs will last in a trap for 3 days if you got water. They gotta have water. Without water, they start killing each other and they die. So that trap hadn't been checked. I had to check it. I couldn't find anyone to go with me. Everybody had to work. It was during the week. I called a friend of mine and I asked her, would you ride over there with me? We pulled in right at the beginning of it, nose first into that. She stayed in the car. I got out and I walked the 2 trail into that big field, and you just have to cross it. It's a few hundred yards across it, and there's a point, and I had a trap right there. As I was walking down the 2 trail, on my left side, I could hear footsteps in the brush. It's extremely thick. There's trees on both sides of this 2 trail, and the wild grapes, the muscadines, they go from the ground to the top of the tree, so that it's a curtain of briars and grapevines. You can't even throw a rock into it. It's so thick, and none of us have ever even been into it. It's just too hard to get into. It's muddy in there, and it's horrible. You'd have to bring some cutters, loppers, and cut your way in. As I'm walking down the road, there's steps on my left in there, fairly close, 20-25 feet from me. And I stopped, and when I stopped walking, it stopped, but it would take one extra step. I'd plant my foot down and go silent, and then there'd be one step and he'd go silent. I went down to the end of it. At the end of the road, there's a small little stream it's always got water and always moving. The water's 1.5 foot, 2 foot wide, just a very shallow little drainage. And that's why we didn't drive the car across it. It wouldn't go through that. It's a pretty deep rut right there where that drainage is. On the left side, you can step over it. It's a big step, but you can step over it to where you're not getting in the mud. When I got up to that, this thing is paralleling me all the way through. I'd stop and it would stop, take that one extra step. I was thinking bear. It's got to be a bear. I don't know what else would walk where I can hear it. It's pretty loud, the steps were. When I get to where the stream is, I step over it, there's leaves on the side. And so there's a pretty loud crunch when my foot hit it. And I heard a noise, loud, throaty noise. And I stopped, and immediately I thought it's a wild pig. It sounded like a sow when she calls her young in that warning call. It was kind of a drawn out call. And I stopped and listened, everything was quiet. I get into the edge of the peanuts, and I got a headlamp on, and so I'm looking to that left for this, if it was a pig, for it to come out. Nothing came out. So I went ahead across the field, the trap was empty, and I'm coming back. Now my headlamp is hitting the ground about 6 feet in front of me. Those fields are loaded with copperheads, and there's several water moccasins. It's a bad place to be. You gotta have snake boots. It's just, there's no way you can work that particular field without them. It's horrible. When I'm coming back, I step over that little stream, and as soon as I stepped where there's no sound, I placed my foot in the ground, I heard the sound again, and I wasn't making any noise that time, and that's when I realized it was a growl. And it wasn't a dog growl. It was much deeper. It was similar to a dog growl, but if you played it on half speed, not a fast, grrr type growl. It was a slower growl, but it sounded like it was coming from within a cave, or it had an echo. It was real deep, bassy sounding, and immediately I thought bear. It wasn't. It definitely was not a grunt. It was something growling, and it scared me. I'm petrified of bears. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to be around them. I've never been around them, so I'm not familiar with them, other than what people have told me or what I've seen on YouTube or in magazines. I took just a couple of steps and this odor hit me, and it was hot. The smell, it burned your nose like it was 100 degrees. It was a horrible stench. It had so many different odors combined into it, like stinky feet and urine. Smelled like an old sweaty dog when they get real wet from running. That nasty, that sour smell, add that to it. Smelled like roadkill that had been set out for a few days. It was just rotten. It was a really nasty odor. My brother-in-law, very familiar with bears, had told me about what to look for if you think you got a bear around, and one of the signs was the smell. He told me they stink, they smell horrible, and everything he explained is what I was smelling. And he's growling. I thought I had a bear beside me. This thing was 25 foot from me, 25 foot. And I was scared. I was so scared. The tooth trail, I was on the right side of it, because when you cross the little stream, you can only cross it if you're on foot on that right side when you're coming back. And so I stepped over to the left tire track. It's dirt. Got a lot of sand in it, so it was nighttime, around 10 o'clock. The peanuts are lime green. You could see 300 yards into the peanut field. They glow into the moonlight. The two stripes where the tire tracks run down this trail, they look white at night. They're not white, but under the moonlight, you can see them. You can see leaves in them without the headlamp. It's pretty bright. Well, I got on that left side, and I'm trying to avoid sticks, leaves, anything that I'm going to step on and get this bear's attention. I did not want this bear coming to me. So I started walking toward the car, and I'm trying to stay focused on the car. I could see it ahead of me, but it was still, I was right at the beginning of the trail, so I had 85 yards to get to the car. This thing on my right is walking with me. So I'm taking baby steps, heel to toe steps, just creeping, trying to be as quiet as I can. And he started aggressively growling. He would growl, and when he would suck air in to do it again, it sounded like he had severe lung disease, heavy congestion. It was real gurgling, like he was drowning. The inhale, but it was just as loud as the growl. When he would inhale, it was gurgling, similar to a growl. Then he'd exhale, and it was demonic sounding. As I'm doing baby steps, I realize this guy's not. He's taking normal steps, but it sounds like he's coming toward me instead of paralleling me like he did when I came across. It seemed like he was coming toward me. So I started taking bigger steps, but fluid steps. I didn't want to draw any attention. The animals can see at night far better than we can. So my headlamp's hitting the ground 6 foot in front of me. I got it on the low setting, conserved the battery life in it. All I got to see is snakes. At that time, the only thing out there that would hurt me is a pig if I injured it by shooting it in the wrong spot, or these snakes. And that's all my concern was before this started happening. As I'm moving, this thing's walking, and the steps are getting louder, the crunching, the sticks and stuff he's coming across. And then I realize he is, without a doubt, he's coming to me. We're going to intersect. And at first it sounded like he was going to come out at the same point that I would on the trail, which wasn't much further ahead of me. And so I started taking a longer stride as I was walking. I can't run. I physically can't due to spinal injuries. And so I'm trying to move quicker, but I don't want this bear to hear me. As I'm moving, he starts coming in to that wall of foliage that's on both sides of the road. I can hear the leaves as he's coming into it, which the foliage is 5 feet from me, and he's 4 or 5 feet on past that is what it sounded. He was right there. He stepped through it, and it sounded as though he was back just a little bit behind me, maybe 20 feet is the way it sounded. He was close. When he stepped through it, I stopped. He was behind me on that trail. I could hear him growling and snarling. He wasn't walking no more. He was silent, and I just, this fear come over me. I didn't want to move. Everything stopped. My body just stopped. And I could see the car. I could see the outline of the car. The lights were off, but the car's running. The air conditioner's on. She's behind the wheel, and I could see her. I could see her outline, through the moonlight. The peanuts are all lime green behind the car, and I could see her and the peanuts through the windshield. I could make out the car, but she couldn't see me because I got the headlamp on the low. But I don't know if she was playing with her phone. I don't know what she was doing. But the lights are off in the car. All I got is this headlamp. This thing's behind me growling. Finally, I got to do something. I can't run. Physically, I can't. If I was able to, I probably would have. I believe I would have. It scared me that bad. But I couldn't get my body to respond. I was so scared. My heart was pounding, and what I thought was the hardest it ever beat. But it wasn't at the time. But it ended up, I stood there, I don't know, it seemed like 2 minutes. It wasn't, it was seconds, I'm sure. But he would growl, and it sounded demonic. It sounded hateful, angry, just a deep, nasty growl. And he'd suck in that gurgling, and then he growled, and then there's a boom. I could feel it in the ground. I felt it come up through my feet. And then it kept happening, this boom and the growling and boom, and I thought, oh my God, and he's smelling, the odor was just horrendous. But I know he's behind me. I know he sees me. And in my mind, this bear is standing there and he's facing me. And he's either hopping, he's doing something. He's pounding. And I can feel it. Whatever he's doing, I can feel it. So I was carrying I think it was a Remington. It was a 7mm short magnum, a long-range rifle. Got a lot of, when it hits, it does a lot of damage, tremendous damage. I turned the safety off. I got my finger in the trigger well, my other hand's on the fore end, and I can't turn my head I can't look straight even with my shoulders due to my neck and spine injury, so I have to twist at the waist. I twisted as hard as I could, and I couldn't turn enough. I couldn't see. And so I shifted my feet. I just kept shifting my left foot and my right foot, and I just kept doing this, kind of doing baby steps until I got my toes pointed to the woods on my left side. And that's when I was able to twist and face what I assumed was a bear. And when I got turned to face him, everything was black, grainy, like if you took a picture of a dark area and zoomed it in as far as you could zoom it, where everything looks like dots and splotches. That's what I was seeing. And I don't know if I was getting dizzy or if it was just the surge of blood pressure, but I thought I was passing out. I thought my vision just went, and now I was fixing to pass out. I couldn't see, and I should have seen the two stripes of the road I should have seen the peanuts because I was closer to them than I was the other end. And I could see the other end, just super bright, and I could not see these peanuts just behind me. He growled, and then that's when I was able to understand he's not back there at 20 feet, he's up there. And my headlamp's aiming down, so I leaned my head back, got my lamp up, and it got up somewhere right about here on him, and it lit him up, and he was right there. He was 3 feet maybe, and he had his fist clenched. He was looking down at me, and he just had this nasty look on his face. He had his mouth kind of open. I could see his teeth. There were no sharp teeth. It looked like a person's teeth, very straight, square teeth. But he would do that. He'd suck in, and when he'd growl, that snarling growl, he would throw his hands down like that, and he'd stomp his foot, and the whole ground would shake. But every time he'd throw his hands down, the wind from his hands, I could feel it hitting me in the face. I don't think his fists were no further than that from actually hitting me. I mean, it was right there, and I didn't know what to do. I had no idea. I've never been that scared, and I don't know what it was. I thought it was a caveman. There wasn't a snout on him. He had hands like we do, and it's hard to fathom a hand that is bigger than your head. His fingers were probably that big around. He had fingernails on them, kind of banged up fingernails, but they were there. The meat under his fingernails was like a dark blue or a light black, really dark colored. And he threw his fist like that and he'd swing them down. I thought I was going to die. And when I seen him, how big he was, I was too afraid to shoot him. There's no way I could have shot him. I couldn't see the road because of him. He was, I don't know, he was 4 feet probably from the outside of his arm. There was so much mass on him. His chest, it wasn't like you see a bodybuilder with a big chest on. It was big like that, but it was like 3 lumps of muscle. There was like a big lump up here, and then a second lump and a third lump. And he had hair on him. He had hair all over him. But you could see the different lumps of muscle. And the top of my head was below his chest. I mean, he was, oh my God. I couldn't tell if he had a belly button, but if he did, it probably would have been about right here to me. And I just had to look up. He was so big, and I don't know what I'd done to make him mad, but a dude was furious at me. And I knew if I shot him, I wouldn't have got out of there. I don't think if I would have shot him in the eye, I think he would have killed me. He was, I mean, it was hell. I was standing at the gate of hell right then. And it infuriates me now, people calling these things your friends, and I cannot read nobody's mind, but I'll tell you, I believe that thing, I believe it would have ate me. If I was there alone, I wouldn't be here now. I have no doubt about that. But just the feeling that comes off of them, there's something, it's not like when you're around other people, but if you've been in a group of strangers, you're in an area, and you brush by somebody kind of close to them, and you get a feeling like, and you look, something about that person. It's not an odor, it's not what they're wearing, it's something they're putting out, and it draws your attention to them. I mean, look at him, you get a feeling in your gut that's bad news. Whoever that guy is, you know, he's bad. Avoid that guy. It was a feeling like that coming off of him. But it was so powerful. It was fear that he was putting out. It was just raw fear. And the more that he done that growling, and look, he was looking right into my eyes, and just these enormous, his eyes were like that. And they looked human a little bit. They were the same shape, but like the colored part around your eye, you know, people got blue eyes, you got the blue color and then the black center. That whole part, the colored part and the black center part, was 3 times bigger than what it should have been. He had very little of the white on the side of it. It was all just the dark color, and then the black pupil. The pupil almost took up the whole colored area. But when looking at me, he wanted me. I mean, he wanted me bad. And there wasn't nothing I could do. And he would growl out, and he'd spit all over me when he'd growl out, and all in my face, and I could smell it. And it smelled like rotten oranges and earthworms, like a cup of fishing worms when you open them. If you would have mixed that with rotten oranges, that was the main part of his breath smelled like that. It was so bad. He was rotten on the inside. But I ended up, I turned back the car. I slowly got turned back, and I didn't know what to do. And he's still behind me, still growling, still stomping. And I could see the car. I looked up, and I couldn't, there's no way I could have made it. I'm around 60 yards from it, and he's less than 3 feet behind me. He's right there. Every time he'd swing his hands, I could feel the air coming off his hands on my neck. And I thought it was over. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how I was going to get to the car. I don't have enough gun. If I'd have shot him with my pistol and unloaded the rifle on him, I think it would have made him mad. And the only thing I'm trying to figure out how to get her attention. I just wanted her to drive to me. I didn't care if it got stuck. I wanted her to drive that car. And I realized the headlamp. And so I just eased my hand up, the one I was holding the trigger with. I eased it up and got the light, and I just flipped it toward her, and I just started going through the different modes. And it had a high, medium, low, and then a red light, and I think it was a green light. And then it would start over, it would go to off, and then high, medium, low, red, green, off. And I just started going through them as quick as I could flick it. And then she turned the headlights on. And I thought, oh my God, thank God. And she turned the high beams on. And then I could hear her screaming. The windows were up, and I could hear her. And she started blowing the horn, and that's when he took off. And he went back to that left side. He came from the right, and he took off. And it sounded like a bulldozer running 70 miles an hour through that mess. And that one, he took so much from me. My joy is the outdoors. You know, I'm a hunter. I've seen more big bucks. If I'm deer hunting, I've seen more big bucks than I will ever harvest. I don't always shoot them. I love watching them. I've let so many walk. I do every year. But I love being there. It doesn't matter if you get anything. It's being there. And he took that from me. And I hunt. I started back a few years later, but it's always there when I'm out there.